Mhm.
that extreme wealth also then throws us into these other forms of identity politics, in
Yeah.
that in order for them to keep doing what they are doing, they have to distract the people below them that are supporting the system,
Yeah.
uh, into, fighting amongst each other.
Oh, yes.
And
I
so as
agree.
long as, the middle class thinks the lower class is the source of their problems,
Yeah. Yeah.
then the
Exactly.
really wealthy are
It's
benefiting.
always easy to punch down, right? So that's what everybody
Right.
tries to do. The people at the top, I hate the people below them, but they know that they can use the people in the middle as a club to beat the people who are at the bottom.
Welcome to another episode of the Bloomburg Democrat. I'm Sally Taylor. This is my thoughtful younger brother, John Daniels. We
Hello.
decided today that we would talk about what to me is a very challenging topic of identity politics, and kind of whether they're helpful, not helpful, good, bad, ugly, whatever the case may be. John, we've talked about identity politics, or at least brought up the subject
Hmm.
without actually any description around it in the past.
Right.
How do you understand the concept of identity politics?
Well, without having looked in a dictionary or anything like that, I never have. But for me, identity politics have always kind of been the thing that it's an emotional appeal. Like people have some deeply held beliefs, and people are basically playing on those deeply held beliefs for political gain. And so they always kind of make a boogeyman, and it's the opposing side, of course, and it's things that are often religious or socially minded for the non-religious, and it's something that's very deep as to who you think that you are as a person, right? Like I identify with this. This is who I am. And that's the target of the attacking by either side. And it's basically it's a us versus them kind of mentality. And hmm, I guess that's more or less it in a bunch of disconnected ways to describe it.
Okay. Yeah, so I kind of look at it a little more broadly, maybe,
Hmm.
in that I think it can definitely be used the way that you just described, kind of creating again that sense of the other, as a way to galvanize a group that you think will support you.
Right.
But I also see it as a way of becoming more inclusive sometimes, right? So we have things
Mhm,
like
mhm.
affirmative action and that sort of thing that help lift
Right,
people up out of, conditions that they were born into, that they did not
right,
create themselves. And
right.
so, I also kind of look at it that way. I think it can be good and bad depending on
Mhm.
the way you look at it and the way you use it. But
Yeah,
it certainly
so
does seem to create a lot of tension.
that's definitely an identity-based desire to reduce prejudice, I would say. But I don't know that that's identity politics, right? Well, it kind of is because you have the people who want to be more inclusive and the people who don't. And so you're appealing to people who want to be more inclusive, right? And still it's a deeply held belief that you are either supporting or attacking in order to gain favor with the electorate.
Right.
Yeah.
Right. I feel like this could be a whole, like, not just a college course, but an
Mm.
actual college, uh
Like a major
like
or a minor or
master's
something.
degree.
Yeah.
Yeah, like I feel like you could get a master's degree in the philosophy around this, because it is
Uh-huh.
so complex and it's so connected to the American experience,
Yes.
particularly
Yes.
because we did come to an existence as a nation as this incoming groups of mostly immigrants. Of course, we've got our native peoples as well,
Right.
but we're largely a nation of immigrants.
Yeah.
And we don't
I think
quite
that,
live up to the way the nation was organized to begin with, but it was not
yeah.
organized inclusively from the start.
No, it
It
was
just
not.
had the wording that allowed us to get there.
Right.
Do you
So
know
no,
what I mean by
I
that
do.
though?
Yes, I do. I do. I understand what you're saying.
Because
Um,
all the laws were
I
geared
think
around
we've,
landowning white men.
yes, yes.
Right?
Yes, no, most definitely. Like that's why I've said in the past, like I don't feel like the United States has ever really been based on like freedom or the concept of all people are equal. Um, we say that
Well,
it
the
was.
concept, yes, the
Well,
concept
yes,
was
so
there,
well, the
but
ideal.
the reality
Yeah. Right.
was maybe not.
Right. And I feel like we have the ideal and then we kind of get lost in the complexity of society. And like we have this social construct that's so large and overarching of our lives, and we feel like it's just as real as other things that I would say are more real, like the need to eat and have personal time and these basic human needs, which are, I think, a very real need, right? But then society builds this kind of artificial world on top of these things, and then we feel like it has the same importance as the necessities of life. Maybe just because we're bombarded by it, and it's not as important, in my view. Some of the things that we think about and that we put importance on, that we put value in, I feel like are sometimes things that are just distractions to being human and living on Earth, you know? And I feel like identity politics are definitely these types of things. They're not so important to us as humans and our ability to survive and thrive, but they are things that we attach so much importance to that it's hard for us to ignore them sometimes, right? A lot of life is just ignoring the noise and doing the things that you need to do. And we let identity politics take a much larger role in our choices than what we should, I think.
Well, you mentioned surviving and thriving, and those are not necessarily the same things,
No,
right?
no, no, no. No, but I think thriving is the ideal, right? And surviving should be the minimum. And we have a really hard time thinking of ideals and then making them real, I feel, as a country in the United States. Like it's obvious that people need health care, but we have a hard time letting go of like the artificial economy that we've kind of built on top of the healthcare industry, right? The healthcare industry should be about healing the sick and prolonging life, right? And improving the quality of life for everyone. And yet we've allowed these artificial constructs to kind of swamp these things that are really important. And like the United States, the healthcare industry is so heavily profit motivated these days.
Right.
On
Well,
the
it's sick
insurance
care
side,
rather than health
yes,
care.
yes, on the insurance side as well as on the healthcare side, although the healthcare professionals, of course, are trying to do their best and this is the reality of the situation. But the ideal is very attainable. Lots of countries in the world have attained much better systems than what we have. And it's because they have a different concept of what is important and what is real. And in the United States, we've really allowed ourselves to be kind of brainwashed and led astray from doing what's best for ourselves and our neighbors.
So I would claim that
Mhm.
identity politics is rampant on both sides of the aisle
Of course, yes, most
in the
definitely.
United States.
Yeah.
And of course, because I personally identify more with the left at this stage in my life.
Mhm.
I've always considered myself independent, but the left represents my morals and ethics more
Yeah, more
closely
closely.
at
Yeah.
right at the moment. How is the left exhibiting perhaps forms of identity politics that are actually harming the way the left sees government and
Mhm.
sees the world? Do you see if what do you identify as the things that we're doing wrong?
Well, I think the cancer culture is basically an example of using identity politics as a club, right? It's forcing people to be who you want them to be, and that's no different than what authoritarianism is. I mean, that is authoritarianism from the left. So I can't say that I disagree with being inclusive, right? I mean, I think that's great, but there must be a better way to exercise inclusiveness than excluding people who think differently. Again, you can't be overly tolerant, or you're just walking into the trap of the intolerant.
Right.
But I don't know. Definitely, I am on the fence with a lot of the inclusive um, way of going about things. Not the message or the ideal itself, but just the way that it's being wielded, I guess.
Yeah. So you talked about cancel culture, and I also have mixed emotions about it, but I also am at a stage where I'm so concerned about how money
Mhm.
impacts politics
Yeah.
that I have very much stopped putting my money into organizations
Mhm.
that don't align with my way of thinking, because that is the
Yes.
way that I vote on an
Yeah.
ongoing basis. And I
Exactly.
don't want someone to use my money to
Mhm.
do things that I don't approve of.
Yes. And this is a system that these people who are abusing the system have created for us, right?
Right.
And so they'll probably say you're hurting the economy, or I'm sure there are ways that they will try to spin what you're doing, but I think that's exactly what you should do, and it's a system that they've created. So you know, get over it. I mean, if you're going to vote with your dollars, then you should vote with your dollars, and no one can complain about it, in my opinion. I think that's the way it
Yeah.
should be.
To me, that's the primary direction of cancel culture. Do you see it working in other ways?
Oh, well, there's the whole social kind of ostracization, like it's sometimes it goes overboard. It's not just voting with your dollars. It's like destroying the character of people, which, well, maybe they're destroying their own character in most cases, but sometimes I feel like we are a little overzealous in our believing of claims. I feel like claims have to be investigated. You have to consider the claims before you just accept them. Um, if there's evidence, then yeah, okay, let's go for it. Like I agree. But if there's not, then come on, we need to pace ourselves.
Yeah. Well, like I said, this is and this is such a big topic, and it's such a challenging topic because
Mm,
identity politics deals with race, it deals with class, it deals with economic structures. It
yeah,
you know,
it's
you can
religion.
kind of religion for
Yeah.
sure. We can come at it from so many different directions, but it's also human nature. We've definitely talked about
Oh yes.
tribalism and collectivism and
Yeah.
individualism in the past as well, but it's human nature. If you
Hmm.
put a classroom full of kids into two different colored t-shirts,
Hmm.
they'll
Yeah.
gravitate towards the kids who have the colored shirt on that they're wearing.
Yeah.
I mean, just naturally, automatically, they group themselves.
Yeah.
And so it is a human condition to group ourselves in these ways.
Yeah.
And even though, certainly things like, I think the racial divide is definitely shrinking and lowering. We're certainly a lot more interracial marriage, a lot more interracial,
Yeah.
children.
Yeah.
We still, if a kid is born interracially, to say a white mother and a black father,
Mhm.
that kid is still considered black
Right.
by
Right.
most of the American culture. By most of
Yeah.
the American culture,
Yeah. It's
right?
a weird.
Well, they're both, you
Yes.
know?
Yes. Well, for a very long time, I have said that the future is not going to be white or black, it's going to be gray, right? Meaning
Right,
that people are going to intermingle and we're going to have most people are going to be some tan color in the future, right?
right.
Like it's
Yeah.
it's not going to be as diverse as it is now. Like we are living in a very small moment of time, and it has really changed a lot in the past, right? Go far enough back, and we have Neanderthals and Homo sapiens and Denisovians all intermingling, and it's increasing, right? It's
Yeah.
multiplying, and it's going to
Right.
continue to multiply until eventually we're all just kind of the same general shade of
Medium
tan.
brown,
Yeah,
right?
yeah,
Yeah. Um, yeah, I agree with that. I do think that that's the way the world is going, because we've become so global
right.
in nature. But we're at this sort of in between point where there's still a
Yes,
lot of resistance to that. I mean,
change is hard. Change is
yeah,
always hard.
I was raised in a generation by a father and I adore my father,
Mhm.
who's now passed away, but by a father who taught us we should not marry outside of our race.
Yeah.
I mean, that was the man that I grew up with. Not
Mhm.
because he didn't think that there, was equal value to all races,
Right.
but because he saw the challenge
Right.
of
He
an
thought it'd be hard.
interracial marriage at that time. Yes, at that
Yes.
period in
That's
time.
what I've heard as well. He thought it was going to be hard.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And there's a lot of people who were raised with a similar outlook,
Mhm.
who are, of course, still living and still interacting in the world, but maybe it wasn't even because they thought it was going to be hard, because they actually said you should not, the
Yeah, yeah,
purity of
yeah.
the race, right?
Right. Or
We are
just
having a rise
lesser
of Nazism
people or
again in America.
yeah.
And I'll call it Nazism. I will call it fascist Nazi principles. We've now had
Mm.
three prominent public figures give what is clearly Nazi salutes on stage and
Right.
in front of cameras.
Right. Yeah.
And of course,
Well,
they're all white men.
yes. Well, recently I saw a picture of Elon Musk wearing the black MAGA hat and wearing
Yeah.
some funky sunglasses. Like, what on earth is he doing? Like,
Right.
if this is the American version of Nazism, however, it's very trailer trashy. Like, it's it's trucker hats.
Well, in America, though, that is largely, uh, well, I say largely, that's where still a lot of the support behind this division of races is still coming from.
Yeah.
Is, I would say, and it's not entirely true, nothing is ever totally concrete when I
Right.
make these generalizations, but is largely our white less educated American public
Oh yes, yes, no
that
doubt about it.
supports that.
Yeah.
And then these men who are reaching for power are working to appeal to that.
Yes.
So whether or not it was ever their foundational belief system or not is
Mhm.
hard to pinpoint, although you can certainly point sometimes historically to their backgrounds and go, yeah, this kind of leads them in that direction.
Yeah.
It can very much, for people at that upper leadership level, be a matter of who's going to support me and what do I have to
Right.
do to
Right.
appeal to them.
Right. Right. Yes, to gain their support, whether or not you're going to actually follow through with anything you say.
Right.
Yes. Well, I really felt like looking at this picture of Elon Musk, I felt like he was kind of trying to channel Donald Trump in a way. I mean, it looked somewhat similar to me. And so I thought, well, like, what's his end game with this? Is he hoping to become the president of the United States at some point?
I would claim he currently
He's
is. I mean, really,
because
truly.
he can't be as a naturalized citizen, like
Right.
you're unable to become
Right.
president. So I guess he's maybe hoping that's going to be changed But
Yeah.
if you're trying to kick all the immigrants out, then that's a that's a Hail
Well,
Mary.
and the fact is he was here for a time illegally himself.
Yeah.
When
Of course,
he
I'm
was
sure.
supposed to be in school, he dropped out of school, he stayed. His
Yeah.
visa was essentially should have been revoked,
Mhm.
and he was here illegally for a period of time.
Yeah.
And yet he is the man I would claim is currently completely in control of what's happening in the government. I don't think that Trump really ever, well, especially at this stage in
Well,
his
I
life,
don't know if he'll
doesn't
ever
really want to lead. He wants to
be
golf
completely in control.
and he doesn't want to go to jail, right?
Yeah.
And he's happy to have somebody else just to hand it to somebody he thinks he thinks highly of.
Uh-huh.
Musk is the wealthiest man that we're aware of on the universe. Maybe he's not truly, but the one that
Yeah.
we're aware of. And money means and Trump was bought and paid for, honestly. I mean,
Oh yeah.
what was it? 270 some odd $1 million
Oh, is that
that
all? That's
yeah. Yeah. That Musk gave to him, that kind of put him into the position that he's at right now.
well for
But
Musk,
yeah,
that's beans.
that's cheap.
Yeah.
That's pennies on the dollar,
Yeah.
really.
Couple
Uh,
weekends out.
Compared to the billions he's made since then.
Yeah.
So, yeah, identity politics seem to be really ramping up in the United States.
Oh yeah. Yeah. And I think they will continue to until everything reaches its boiling point, and we have to realize that we are all one people, and we need to look out for each other. When that finally happens, I think we'll see an end to identity politics for a while. But as you say, I think it's part of the human condition, and I hope that we can, as a people, try to be better than our basest of instincts, you know? Because that's the real kind of end game. Like humans have to figure out how to be better than being human. Because being human is there's a lot of good things, but there's a lot of bad things about being human too. Like you just look back at history, all the bad
Yeah.
stuff that's been done has been done by humans. And all the good stuff that's been done has also been done by humans. And so, do you want to be one of the bad guys or one of the good guys, basically? And so, if you want to be a good guy, you just kind of have to start working towards it. But yeah, I think it's going to be
So much
hard to get
is
ourselves off of identity politics because it's part of who we are.
right, and so much is based around ideology and you mentioned religion earlier. Religion seems to have such a huge impact on it.
Yeah.
And I'm very concerned about the Christian nationalist sort of direction that we're headed now.
Yeah.
I I have good friends who support Donald Trump,
Yeah.
and I'm so confused by it because they claim to be Christian, right?
Yes. Yes.
And it
Yes.
seems so
So
antithetical
yes,
to
this
what
is
they claim to believe.
exactly identity politics, right? I mean, they
Yeah,
are identifying with someone because he claims to identify with them, right?
right.
Even though the truth is clearly not that he identifies with them. He's clearly just saying that he identifies with them, but that's enough, right? People believe what they want to believe. They hear what they want to hear.
Exactly.
Yeah.
And it's so confusing for me to watch this happen
Yeah.
because I will hear people scream about my tax dollars should not be feeding children at school. Their parents should be feeding them. Why should I have to pay for kids'
Well, I think
school
their parents
lunches?
would pay for them if they could.
Right. Well,
Yeah.
and so that is my response is that there are a huge number of children without food security,
Yeah.
and a child who is hungry cannot learn.
Right.
So, if you want an educated public, you need to make sure children have the capacity to learn, and that often means they need food,
Yeah. Yeah. Well, I mean,
right?
so it really just depends on who you're talking to because not
Right.
everybody wants an educated public, right?
Well, but that's my point then. How does a Christian person say, I don't think I should be feeding children?
Well, Christians are not about education, first of all, right? A lot of
Right.
Christians say if it's not in the Bible, then they don't need to know about it.
Right.
Education is not high on the list of things in the Christian psyche.
Well, it depends on the Christian, but Yes.
Yes.
Depends on the Christian.
Right. Right.
Uh, but feeding
Generational
children, you would think, what you would
battle.
think, making
Mhm.
sure children have food in their stomachs as a Christian would
Yes, you would think so.
override whether or not you thought they should be educated,
Yeah, so
right?
there's clearly a lot more psychology going on here than just like having a belief and sticking to it.
Right,
Like there's clearly something that's more important to these people than Christianity, and that's what they're prioritizing. And that might not be what they think they're doing, but clearly that's what they're doing. They're prioritizing something else over Christianity because the message of Christianity is quite clear. Take care of the poor and the needy, right?
right.
I mean, there's no question about that.
I would
So
agree.
either you're taking care of the poor or the needy, or you're a bad Christian, basically.
Yeah,
And
yeah.
I'm a bad Christian, but not because I don't take care of the poor and the needy. I try to do that, but I don't do the other Christian stuff because I'm not a Christian.
Right. Well,
So I'll
it's
happily be a bad Christian, but I'm not going to be a bad person.
right. So I don't actually have a problem if somebody asks me if I'm a Christian. What I say
Hmm.
is I believe in the teachings of Christ, or the
Yeah,
man that they understand to be Christ, right?
right, right.
So I don't have a problem, at the very
Yeah.
least, saying I believe in those teachings.
Oh, yes, I agree. I completely agree with the teachings of Jesus. Those are all wonderful hippie ideas. I love them all.
Yeah, I do
Yeah,
too. But do I believe in the Bible?
yeah,
If they ask
yeah.
me that, then I've got another discussion to have, right? It's
Exactly,
an
exactly.
entirely
Uh,
different topic.
yeah, yeah.
So yeah, I don't know that identity politics are going to improve
Mm.
until there is more pain attached
No,
to
yeah, I
where
agree.
we're currently headed.
Right. We have to learn that we have to be better than we are.
Let me ask you this. Let me ask you this. Do you see identity politics in the same light as class warfare politics?
It is very similar, I would guess, because class warfare is typically top down, right? You have the people with high class who are trying to maintain that high class and suppress the people with low class so that they don't gain high class. And so that is a form of identity politics. You have a group of people saying that we are better and we want to probably elect people who are going to preserve our way of thinking as opposed to the way of thinking of others. So I mean that is basically identity politics. Yeah.
Yeah. And so that's where I'm going to be guilty. And I probably have more bias against rich people than the average person. And
Oh, I have
and
lots of
I'm a
that.
very comfortably middle class, person.
Yeah.
I live in a house that's too big for me right now,
Mm,
because I like to have room for my grandkids when they come. And,
mhm,
my husband needs an office and I have a studio, and we all have our
mhm.
own spaces. So I'm comfortable. We talked about the shooting of the CEO, the United
Yeah.
Healthcare CEO before.
Yeah.
And while I don't condone murder, I also understand how it happened. And
Yep.
I think it's a wake-up call, right?
Yeah. It
Because
should
we
be.
have such an increasing divide between the haves and the have-nots.
Yeah.
And the haves are putting all of their money, well, not all of it, but a nice chunk of their
Yeah.
money
Yeah.
into politics in order to control it. And in
Yeah.
order to have more flow to them that's
Yes.
coming off of the backs of the people who actually do all the work in the nation,
Right. Right. Not even just
right?
maintaining the status quo, but to increase their
Right.
positions.
Right.
Yeah.
So like I sent $10 to Bernie Sanders uh yesterday because
Yeah.
he's now on the road, basically talking about the oligarchy again and how we
Yeah.
have to stop this oligarchic movement in our
Yeah.
nation. And he's always towed that line. He's been consistent throughout his career
Yep.
that this was coming, it was happening, and it was a problem, and that we needed to change it.
Yep.
And so I agree with him wholeheartedly on
Yeah.
that.
Yeah. I did too.
But then I wonder, am I basically biased against rich people? I mean, to some degree.
Well, I
And
mean,
even being a comfortable person, I mean, not wealthy, but secure. I'm a secure person.
yeah,
I see that continuing realignment of wealth to the very, very upper classes to
yeah,
be a potential bomb
yeah.
that's about to go off.
Oh, yeah, yes. Well, I mean, the robber barons did not make it out happy in the end.
Right.
And that's how it's going to be. I mean, basically, we have robber barons today. The prices of everything are going up, not because things are actually more expensive. It's mostly because the value of money is going down. Um, Corporate profits must be maintained, right? Like, even I see the Mozilla Corporation. I don't know if you're familiar with Mozilla. They make the Firefox web
Oh,
browser.
okay. Yep,
And
yep.
so they
I know who you're
started
talking about.
off as a nonprofit organization that the purpose was to make money so that they could make a really good web browser. But they've expanded the scope of their mission, and now they're just trying to make money so that they can keep doing a whole bunch of stuff. And they should really just kind of get back to their web browser, right? Because it's flailing a little bit. But there's this drive to increase profits and to always have continual growth. And so now they're talking about they want to do AI and they want to increase their ad revenue, right? And all of these things are the people who are interested in open source software, which is what the Fire browser is based on. Like it's very antithetical to be focused on profits and increasing revenue. That's not the goal, right? And so
Right.
it's happening everywhere, even in what you would consider to be like a good organization. Like sometimes they're just so focused on always having more, right? Why can't you just have enough, right? Like they probably hit a size that was ideal for them to make a good web browser and have money to keep the lights on. But then they started aiming higher, and I don't think you need to ever aim higher. Like having enough is enough, right? So now you can maybe just work on something personal, right? Don't It doesn't always have to be like business oriented and stuff in life. You don't have to always be thinking about corporate profits. Who cares about corporate profits? It's not going to help you have a better life, right? For anyone in the corporation. So, well, I mean,
Well, I mean,
the
I
people at the
think there would
very
be
top, yes,
right. There were
but
people that would disagree with that. I mean,
yes,
their
but then
comfort
the
level
question
comes from
is,
somewhere.
like, are you beyond that level where an increase in your income actually makes you happier, right?
Right.
So if you're making $1 billion and you suddenly you're making 1.2, is your life any better? I don't think so.
Right. Well, at what stage can you never spend all the money you made? you
Oh,
know?
Elon
I
Musk
mean,
is
what
at that
is
stage.
that
Jeff
line?
Bezos is at that stage. It's
right.
it's it's probably around 1 billion, I would guess. Like
Yeah.
you have to really be throwing it away to spend it.
Right. To
Yeah,
really you get yeah, I agree. I'm at the stage now at this point. There was a time in my life where I might have prickled a little bit at the redistribution of
yeah,
resources. I'm
yeah,
no longer there because it's become so extreme
yeah,
that I do believe you've got to start taxing the super wealthy at
yeah,
much more significant rates.
yeah,
And this is where my identity politics comes in.
yeah,
My personal identity politics is around those who have so much that
yeah,
they're sucking the rest of the nation dry
yeah.
and not distributing it back. I actually had an epiphany the other day.
Mm,
It was I get visuals in my head all the time,
mhm,
and it was this sudden sort of recognition of the economy and the and money being
uh-huh,
like the circulatory system in that it
mm.
has to flow to keep the organism healthy.
Right, right, right,
And
right,
if
right,
it
right, right,
starts
right.
pooling in one area,
Yeah,
the whole system dies,
it gets amputated
right?
eventually.
Yeah, yeah, exactly. And
Yeah,
if it's pooling in the head,
yeah,
it's over. The system
yeah,
absolutely dies, right?
yes,
And
yes.
so we've got to get back to the idea that this money has to flow through the entire system and
Yeah.
circulate so
Yeah.
that it whole thing stays healthy. We're not doing that
We've
anymore.
bought into the whole trickle down type of idea
Yeah,
that we think that pooling money at the top is going to actually improve life for other people, but it just doesn't. It never has.
right. Exactly.
No.
And so that's where my my identity politics comes into play. I
Yeah.
really struggle with the extreme wealth that
Yeah.
exists now. And
Mhm.
that extreme wealth also then throws us into these other forms of identity politics, in
Yeah.
that in order for them to keep doing what they are doing, they have to distract the people below them that are supporting the system,
Yeah.
uh, into, fighting amongst each other.
Oh, yes.
And
I
so as
agree.
long as, the middle class thinks the lower class is the source of their problems,
Yeah. Yeah.
then the
Exactly.
really wealthy are
It's
benefiting.
always easy to punch down, right? So that's what everybody
Right.
tries to do. The people at the top, I hate the people below them, but they know that they can use the people in the middle as a club to beat the people who are at the bottom.
Right.
And that's what they do. Yeah.
And that's what's happening.
Yeah.
So I've talked about my friends who are Trump supporters, and one of them, I'll occasionally ask them, how they're seeing things, and
Mm.
one of my friends says, "Oh, I hate the whole woke agenda. It's just this woke thing,
Yeah. Yeah.
which to me is dog whistle,
Yeah.
right?
Yeah.
Because that first off, that term woke originated within the African American community,
Hmm.
uh, but it's based in really, in my mind, really great ways of thinking of being aware and being
Hmm.
inclusive and being just kind of
So,
on your toes about and about what's going on. But in
yeah.
her mind, she sees it as things being forced upon her, forced to accept transgender people, forced to accept,
Uh-huh.
racial equality, forced to,
Yeah.
accept all of these things that she does not want to accept,
Yeah.
right?
I feel like this idea of woke has gone through a lot of kind of transitions. Like the first time that I heard the word woke, it was I mean, of course it's connected to the word like wake up, right? And so for me it was when people were constantly saying like wake up sheeple, right? The idea that people are just following, they're not paying attention to what's going on. It's like they're asleep, right? And so wake up people, you're just being scammed basically by both sides. And so then this has changed from that point, from wake up and look at what's going on. Um, it's kind of become, and for me, that was like Bernie Sanders' time that I really kind of started to hear wake up," and and then it's morphed. It has changed, and I think the meaning has mostly changed by the people who were against the term. Um, it's the people who are saying I hate the woke agenda that have been piling meaning onto the word woke,
I
because
agree.
the original meaning was just like wake up and look at the people who are lying to you. You're being lied to. And it's been changing and changing and changing. And now what it means to be woke is, yeah, maybe something that's not desirable, but I guess it depends on which way you're looking at it. If
Right.
because if you're woke, then maybe you're awake and you're looking at the lies. Um, and that is something that's maybe undesirable to somebody who doesn't want to wake up, right?
Right.
If you're in a dream and the dream is nice, or at least you have a perception that the dream is nice, then yeah, you want to keep dreaming.
Yeah.
So the cry to wake up, I think, was a good one. And
I agree.
yeah, and we've allowed that word to become a dirty word. Um,
Right, but it's become a dirty word on one side of the aisle,
yeah,
right? It's
yeah,
become it became used to say, you know, I don't want to support gay marriage, or I don't want to believe in affirmative action, that it could
right.
actually help right some wrongs that have been done,
Yeah,
or help elevate a traditionally disadvantaged group of society.
Yeah,
Um,
and really the original meaning wasn't those things, but it's become an
right.
anti-progressive
Yes.
mantra, right?
Yes, I would agree with that. Mhm.
Yeah, so I mean, to be woke was not any of those. It was just like let's make life better, right? And so then you start pinpointing areas of life that you don't like, and you start claiming that this is woke, right? And so then people who agree with you will then start joining the bandwagon, and then suddenly everybody thinks that this is what woke means. I don't know. I like to understand the true meanings of words and to use them correctly so that we can communicate more effectively personally.
Yeah. Well, that's
Yeah.
why I wanted to talk about identity politics today, was
Yeah.
because I feel like we've been bringing it up
Yeah.
without sort of addressing what the definition is.
Yeah.
And of course, I
Well,
think it's a broad. I think the
yeah.
definition is very dependent on your perspective around it,
Yes. Yes.
much
Well,
like the
so
term
again,
woke.
I am not a prescriptivist per se when it comes to language. I don't like to tell other people what words mean. But I do feel like we have to agree on what words mean if we're going to effectively communicate, right?
Communicate. I agree.
We have to make like a standard of meaning.
Mm,
Otherwise, we're going to have a hard time telling each other what we're actually thinking, right?
right.
And a lot of trouble comes down to miscommunication. Yeah, so I'm
Mm.
all for correcting the record.
Right. Well, and that's why I find things like that term woke to be really interesting,
Hmm.
because I've got people who I know who definitely view it in a negative light,
Yes,
but
no,
I'm
it's
I'm
depending
more
on.
from the positive light side of things,
Yes,
right?
it's
That to
derogatory
me it's a
depending on who you're
positive.
talking to.
Exactly.
Yeah.
Exactly.
And then it
Uh
shouldn't be. It should just be about waking up and then paying attention to the world around you and trying not to fall for the grifters.
okay, John. I
Mm.
think again, we've had an interesting discussion.
Yeah.
Do you see this improving with the current state of affairs, or do you think it's gonna get a little bit worse before it
Um,
might get better,
it
or a lot
depends.
worse?
I think it depends on like the time frame. So long term, I think yes, that things will continue to improve. I think that humanity continues to improve over the long term. We may not see it in our lifetimes, and our children may not see it in their lifetimes, but I think eventually we will all become educated enough that we stop hating each other.
I
Yeah.
sure hope so.
Yeah.
That's my feeling as well. In my mind, each generation is a
Yeah.
little better than the
Yeah.
last.
Yeah.
I
And
really
I
do
do
believe
think
that.
these are kind of like these are the death rows of old ways of thinking, you know. Old habits die hard and they don't want to die and they're fighting. But, you know, we're all going to die. And then the people who come are going to have different ideas and they're going to do what they want to do. And eventually, the people with good ideas, I think, will outnumber the people with bad ideas.
Let's keep our fingers crossed it's
Yeah,
sooner rather than
yeah,
later.
I'm hoping.
All right. Thank you, John.
Thank you.
Till next time.
If you enjoyed this content, please hit like, subscribe, and ring the bell for notifications.